Micheal Sweet, welcome to the Chad Silveus Show.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You are the lead singer of Stryper, and you also have an amazing solo career. You have a new album out called 10. We're going to talk plenty about that. But the very first thing I want to do, Micheal, is give you a background on my relation to you. And my first question is, have you ever seen the television show Full House?
Of course. Okay,
you know John Stamos' character, Uncle Jesse?
Yes.
Well, in the show Full House, his character, Uncle Jesse, has a preoccupation with Elvis, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's very into Elvis, which I am too. Not like that, but I grew up on Elvis, so I get it.
Well, it's hard not to be into Elvis, but here's the reason I ask you this, is because you are my Elvis.
Well, that's very kind to you, man. Very flattering and humbling at the same time.
Well, when I was a younger man growing up, obviously the heyday of Stryper, everywhere you went, you could buy Stryper posters, magazines with Stryper pictures in them. My entire bedroom was just covered with nothing but Stryper.
Wow. So it must have given you a headache when you walked in your room if it was covered, because all the yellow and black stripes. I used to get headaches sometimes when I walk on stage back in 87, 88. Everything was striped, and I would literally get dizzy from it.
Are you getting sick of the yellow and black then?
Not that I'm getting sick of it. It's just, it's harder and harder each year with each album, photo shoot or whatnot, or tour, to come up with different ideas in clothing and whatnot. You're kind of stuck to one particular, obviously, scheme or color scheme, and it limits to a degree because you can't use red or blue, or I guess we could. We did before we tried with Against the Law. People didn't seem to like that too much, so it didn't go over very well with the fans.
Well, as a fan, I vote for the yellow and black keeping it. Stryper was the very first concert I ever went to in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in God We Trust tour. My ears are still ringing. I'm not even kidding you.
Oh, yeah, no, we were loud back in the day. We're still loud. I don't think we're as loud as we used to be, but we used to be really, really loud. And, hopefully it was a good loud. I've been to some shows where, it was quite a bad loud. It hurt and it was not enjoyable, but I've been to some shows that was a good loud. I saw Motley Crue at, fairly recently with Kiss at the Comcast Center here, and man, I tell you, it was too loud. It was not enjoyable. It just hurt, and it was like, so I hope we weren't that loud.
Well, you guys are the loudest band I've ever seen, but I tell you what, it was worth it because your music, I just love it so much, and it was a great show. One of the best shows I've ever seen still to this day. Now let's talk a little bit about the beginnings of Stryper. I mean, I'd like to, start there if we could, because it's you're a very unique band because you were so groundbreaking, bringing Christians and being involved with heavy metal. How did the band get formed?
Well, I mean, we grew up in musical families, and to a degree, Christian families, all of us. And what I mean by to a degree is a little later in life. When I was 12, I accepted Christ, and we got into a church as a family, and then I fell out of that and walked away from that. And got involved in, the club scene and drinking and smoking and all the stuff that goes along with that. And then I basically wound up rededicating my life and Stryper as a band when I was 20. So, for whatever reason, I don't have the answers to this. It's a good question for God someday. But we, at a young age, decided to turn our lives around. We had some influence. A couple friends of ours come to us, and we saw a change in their lives and in their, in their spirit and in their eyes and just everything. As people, they changed so radically for the good. And they came to us and said, hey, you guys should devote your band to God. If you do, God's going to really use it to the fullest, and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. Almost like a prophetic moment in time. And we did that. We decided after a few weeks of thinking about it, we decided to do that. And we changed the lyrics and devoted our band to God. And we basically were the only band to do so. back at that time, to do it like we did it, and to the degree that we did it at, and the level we took it to, and the rest is history. And we wouldn't change a thing. I mean, we've been scrutinized and taken lots of heat for it over the years, and that's the way it's going to be. Anytime you take a stand for God, you're not going to be in the majority. You're going to be in the minority for sure. And, people are going to come against you, and we've seen that. But, that's kind of where it all began. And like I said, 36 years have passed, and I look back and I think, wow, look at everything that's transpired. It's amazing.
Now, it was such a groundbreaking thing to be a Christian in a heavy metal band. Like you said, nobody else was really doing that. How scared were you to make that decision? What challenges did you come across by making that decision?
Well, I don't think we really thought about it. At least my personality is one to not sit and dissect things and say, okay, is this going to work? Are people going to, beat us up? Is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? I don't really think about that stuff. If I feel led to do something, I do it. And, I basically take on whatever comes with that. And, and that's fine. And that's just how I'm built. I'm one of those guys that's very driven, and it's like, okay, let's do this. And I don't give it a lot of thought. There are those people that do sit down and put it on paper and try to work it out and dissect it. And, well, this is going to happen, and that may not happen. And we didn't do that. We just ran with it. And we dove right in the deep end and said, we're doing this. And, we have no regrets. I mean, we've made mistakes over the years and made poor choices and all the above, but we really have no regrets, and we wouldn't go back and change a thing in that regard in terms of what we've stood for and what we decided to do back in 1983, late 83 into 84.
All the Stryper albums that you've made, I love them. I love them all. What was the album where you have the fondest memories of making with everybody else in Stryper?
And fondest memories would be definitely the album Soldiers Under Command, because we went in and it was a very exciting time for us. It was when we were just on the brink of breaking and breaking out from the club scene and where we were in LA, and we were working with the world-renowned producer Michael Wagner at a world-renowned studio, Amigo, where Van Halen recorded, one of our favorites, and Doobie Brothers, and all these huge artists and albums. And it was just a very memorable experience for us. And it was that moment in time where we felt like, wow, we've done it. We've, for lack of a better way of putting it, we've made it. The old cliche, we've made it. And then we went right from recording that album to flying to Japan for the first time and recording live in Japan. So literally within 1 month, we recorded Soldiers Under Command and recorded live in Japan. So it was an interesting time. And I look back on those days, and I can clearly, crystal clear, remember everything and how exciting it was and how special it was, and such a unique opportunity in the history of the band.
I wore out both my Soldiers Under Command cassette tape and the VHS tape to live in Japan. Like, destroyed them. I watched them and used them so much. But as a fan, I must tell you, from my perspective, when I was back in the 80s, probably for a period of time, my two favorite Stryper albums were To Hell with the Devil and In God We Trust. But looking back, I think that Soldiers Under Command has aged better than any Stryper album, and now it's my favorite Stryper album from the 80s.
I think so too. And it's always the album in terms, people say, what's your favorite Stryper album? And I could never give them just one answer. It can't just be one album. And I always say, well, my favorite classic album is Soldiers Under Command. And it really always has been. And the reason for that is the songs, of course, but the energy. There's a really unique energy to that album and a fire to that album. I'm not saying To Hell doesn't have that. I'm not saying In God We Trust doesn't have that. I'm just saying that there's something very unique and special about Soldiers Under Command. And I think it's because of where we were at in our career and the history of the band. And we were so excited, and that comes through in the music and in the performances. And I love it. And you know, my favorite recent album would probably, you know, be Goddamn Evil. And I say that because I really feel that kind of has the closest recaptured the energy of the 80s Stryper. You know, I mean, No More Hell to Pay is great, Fallen is great, and people would argue with me on that, and that's fine. But I just really believe that GDE has this very unique energy as well that takes me back to that Soldiers era and To Hell with the Devil era. So those are my two favorite albums, Soldiers and GDE. And I tell you, man, I think I'm one of those guys that really believes that the best is yet to come. And I've said that many times, but I'll say it again. I think the best is yet to come. We have not made our best album yet. And we're going to someday soon.
Well, that brings me to my next question. First of all, I want to tell you what my favorite recent Stryper album is, and your favorite solo record is, because your stuff is so amazing and so diverse. And as a fan, I just got to tell you. But before I get to that, you know, one of my questions is you have aged like fine wine. Like unbelievably. And heavy metal bands from the 80s or hard rock bands, however you want to phrase it, there just seems so many of them are not aging well, not only physically, but musically. But your voice, your songwriting, your guitar playing, it's just absolutely, it is getting better. That's what's so amazing. What is your secret?
Well, that's very kind of you to say, man. I don't know if I agree with you, but that's very nice of you to say. I try to take care of myself in all aspects, you know, physically, musically, spiritually. I really try to take care of myself and stay in line with what I should be doing. You know, if we're going out to do a tour, I try to get in shape. You know, I try to think of it as a job as well as a ministry, and as well as you know, a career and a love. It's also a job. And I want to do the best job possible. So in order to do that, I got to be in shape, just like a team that's going out to play and they're trying to win the Super Bowl. They're trying to win the World Series. You got to go train. You got to go get in shape for it. I try to do that. I try to eat right and condition my body and go out. So when I go out, I'm not, you know, 25 pounds heavier or 50 pounds heavier. And people are going on YouTube, oh my gosh, what happened to this guy? So I try. I'm not saying that I'm successful at that, but I try really hard. And then musically, I try too. I work hard on songs. I work hard on recording. I try to make things really good and at a level that's consistent with the past, and putting out quality work. So I just go out of my way to give people the best. And I think my personality helps determine that as well. I'm OCD and I'm ADHD. I hyper-focus on stuff. I OCD over stuff. And I think that helps me to do my best and to give my best.
The production value on the albums are just outstanding as well. You know, you put a post on social media recently asking Stryper fans like what they're looking for in the next Stryper album. And I wanted to ask you about that because my 2 cents as a fan is, first of all, I don't think you're ever going to guess what my favorite, you know, after Stryper reunited album is. But I'll just tell you, my favorite, I mean, I love the new album. I love all the albums. There's not a Stryper album that I don't love. There's not a solo album that you have that I don't love. But if you got to rank it, I'll rank it. My favorite after you guys reunited is Reborn.
You know what? It's funny you say that. That's an album like the song Take It to the Cross. There's no middle ground. People love it or they hate it to the extreme. Same thing goes for that album. There's a group of people that love that album and it's one of their favorites. There's a group of people that hate it and it's one of their least favorites. There's no middle ground. You won't hear people say, or at least I haven't, people say, oh yeah, I like Soldiers and then No More Hell to Pay and then Reborn. It never falls in the middle. And the funny thing about that album, and I've said it a billion times, so people may roll their eyes when I say it again, but it's true, is that was a solo album. That was not a Stryper album. I recorded that. I was at my house in Buzzards Bay, Bourne, Massachusetts, back in 2002, and I started writing the songs for that album right there on the spot, and I just started recording them right there in my basement. I had a little drum machine that I used often, and I tracked the guitars, and I laid down bass, and I basically tracked everything. And I did one song after the other, boom, 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 boom. And after a few weeks, I had that album, and I shopped it to a number of labels, and I had a deal on paper with a label. I didn't sign it, and Stryper wound up doing the 2003 tour, and then we wound up going replacing the bass player again at that time, and we wound up going and doing a show, and I played it for the guys and said, hey, what do you guys think of this? And Oz really loved it and said, wow, man. And the comment was thrown out there like, this should be a Stryper album. Why couldn't this be a Stryper album? And my brain started spinning with that, and we wound up signing a deal with the same label that was going to sign me as a solo artist, which was Big 3 Records, and they were that was originally going to be a solo album. And it's funny because if you go back and listen to the demo, the demo that I recorded at my house, it's identical to the Stryper album, to the Stryper version. There's no difference. The only difference is we added In God We Trust, modern version, and re-recorded the drums and added a few little things here and there, but literally there's no difference. And we released that as a Stryper album. I mean, that was really the most logical thing to do at that time in order to get a Stryper album out there. And everyone agreed, let's do this, and that's why we did it. But it's a solo album, and maybe that's why some people don't like it as a Stryper album. And maybe that's why some people love it. And it's one of their favorites. Like you're saying, it's one of your favorites. So I don't know, man. I try to write good songs and songs that are going to touch people and move people, and that's all I can hope for. I really want to have a positive effect on people's lives, so at the end of my time on earth, I can look back and say, good job. I inspired a few folks along the way.
You've definitely inspired me as not only a fan, but as a believer in Jesus. And I always was so impressed to how you and the rest of the guys, went up against the opposition of the world and just did what you did for the glory of God. And it was just awesome. It always inspired me. It still does to this day. Now, as far as your solo work is concerned, once again, there's not an album you have that I don't love. I love your new album, 10. I do want to say from your past albums, an album, and this just shows your songwriting. You're such an amazing songwriter. And an album that touched me, and still this day, like I could put on, multiple Stryper albums and just listen to them, go for a drive across country and just listen to them over and over again. Reborn's one of them. Of course, all the albums from the 80s. But as far as your solo work is concerned, historically, the album that I've loved the most, it's one of my favorite albums ever recorded, was your Real album.
Well, good, man. Yeah, and that was a completely different turn, in terms of style. People obviously expect from Micheal Sweet guitar-driven edge, high-octane vocals, that whole thing. They kind of expect that. That's what they remember, and that's what they usually want. And to do an album like the first solo album, which was definitely a little different, it wasn't that. It was more AOR / commercial, mainstream kind of rock. And then to release Real, which was more acoustic driven, it was definitely quite a turn. But it's got some really good songs on it. Real has some, again, I always say this, I just posted this on Facebook to up-and-coming musicians and artists, that it's all about the song. That's where you start. If you don't have a song, if you don't have a good song, then you don't have anything. You can have a killer vocal performance and, the best musicians in the world and the best producer in the world and the best label in the world, but if you don't have a song, you're spinning your wheels because you're not going to go anywhere. And to me, it always starts with the song. And if I've got a bunch of songs that I really like and I think people are going to like, then everything else will fall into place. So I knew that Real had some really good songs. And I decided to take it in a different direction musically, but a lot of people like that album. So you're one of them, and that's great to hear.
Back to the social media comment you made about what people want to hear the next Stryper album. It made me start thinking about how and what incredible songwriter you are. And you're also like specifically, you can write, that's what your diversity of some of those albums I talked about. This a very diverse range of things that you write and make really beautiful music with. But I will tell you, I've always had the opinion that you are one of the finest ballad writers I have ever seen, or ever heard, I should say. And as far as the next Stryper album, have you ever thought about just, doing a mixture of ballads and like some of the more, like I am shocked that in the 80s, and maybe it was because of the Christian moniker that, you got held back a little bit, but I am shocked that you never had a number one hit because you write number one hits. Some of those ballads, some of those, poppier, metal tunes could have been number one.
Well, I'll tell you, man. Again, you're being too kind, and I really appreciate it. And my gosh, it's great to hear someone that respects the stuff and likes the stuff that I do. So thank you. I'm happy to hear that. I've always thought that. I'll be honest. I mean, and it's tricky because how do you say this without sounding like an egomaniac or someone that's so hung up on themselves? But it's one of those things where I do believe that, and specifically the ballads, that there are quite a few that could have been certainly top 10. There's a song I wrote for my wife called "How to Live." It was on "I'm Not Your Suicide," and that song to me and everyone that I played it to in my circle, and my circle's pretty big, everyone was like, "That's a hit. That's a smash. That's a smash." The thing is, sadly, the world, at least right now, won't know that or doesn't know that because there's no format for guys like myself. It's like, where do you take a song like that to? I'm an 80s guy on relatively small labels. I'm not in the big machine. I'm not on, Sony or, I'm not in the big machine. And unless you have a big machine like that behind you, it's very difficult to break something. And it's a lot of money to break something. And a lot of times these smaller labels don't really know how to do it, even if they have the money. But, there are a lot of songs I listen to and I just think, gosh, that could have been a hit. There's a song on the new album called Let It Be Love. I mean, if that's not a radio friendly hit, I don't know what is. And I feel like I know music fairly well. I love, bands and artists that have produced hit after hit after hit after hit, and those are the bands that have influenced me. Bands like the Beatles and Creedence Clearwater Revival and ELO and Bread and Journey, and I mean, the list goes on. And I know a good song when I hear it. I do. I'm a good judge of a good song, and I've been fortunate and blessed enough to be able to write a few over the years, but sadly, they just haven't seen the light of day. And I don't have the answers for that. It does it bum me out? Yes, it does. I'd be a total liar if I said otherwise. Because I pour my heart and soul into something, and I work so hard to make it great. And then when you see it get released and it's got 3,000 views on YouTube after 5 years, it's a little heartbreaking at times. But, you know, it doesn't stop me or discourage me from slowing down. I'll just keep putting them out. I'll keep recording solo albums and songs and writing songs and keep writing ballads and, to keep trying to outdo myself. And I still really believe the best is yet to come, and I'll keep doing that. So maybe someday when I'm 90, I'll have a top 10 hit.
Weird Al just got his, how many years ago? And he was... Tell us about your new album.
Well, I'm excited about it. It came out 3 weeks ago, and I'm really actually going on 4 weeks ago. I'm really excited and thrilled to just have opportunities to record music and that people want to work with me. And, I'm very blessed, man. In a sea of difficulty, this music world is very interesting. It's not an easy place to be able to survive. I've been able to somehow survive, and I'm very happy and blessed and fortunate to be able to say that. So I'm thrilled that I've got 10, and people seem to like it. The reviews are really good, and I'm already planning on an 11.
Now, what about a tour?
Tour next year. Stryper fly dates. We're planning some Micheal Sweet ground runs, a couple of them, with the Killer Band going out and finally, and it hasn't been done since 2001, finally going out and playing some of these songs live, solo songs, not only solo songs, but Sweet and Lynch songs as well. I haven't been able to organize getting George to go out and commit, so I'm going to go do it on my own, and I'll do it with the killer band, killer guitar player who can play all that stuff, and we're going to finally bring these songs to life, and they're going to see the light of day in a live setting.
Well, Micheal, thank you so much for coming on the Chad Silveus Show, and I hope to have you back real soon.
Okay, brother. God bless you, man. Thanks for your time.